ExpressVPN is probably one of the most recognizable names in VPNs today. With over 2,000 servers in over 148 countries, it's super accessible to anybody. But here's my question, is it any good? Right off the bat, I want to go into ExpressVPN's pros and cons, its features, how it does in speed and leak tests, its subscription information, customer support, and finally, the ExpressVPN app itself. So by the end of today's review, you'll be an expert in ExpressVPN and confident to know if it's the right VPN for you. Now, if you'd like to see a list of our favorite VPNs, Google Security.org best VPNs. If you have a question about today's review, leave us a comment and I'll get back to you. Let's start with the pros and cons. Pro. ExpressVPN is not a part of any of the large international surveillance programs. It is headquartered in the British Virgin Islands, and that place in itself doesn't have any data retention laws. So you don't have to worry about anyone retaining your data or them giving your data over to anyone else. Aside from that, ExpressVPN will not log your traffic data, so you can use split tunneling to access things like Netflix. Now, not to give too much away, but the ExpressVPN app is really highly rated and its customer support has great reviews. Finally, ExpressVPN did really well on all the tests that we ran, including speed, DNS leak, and WebRTC leak. But we'll get into all that later. Cons. Let's talk about some of the things I don't love about ExpressVPN. One is that they only give you 3 simultaneous connections, and that's a bit low for a subscription service. You want to be able to use it on multiple devices at one time. And the other is that while this is pretty typical of VPN companies, they do not have any phone support. So once again, that's a typical thing, but still something I'd like to have access to. All right, so now I want to talk about the features on the ExpressVPN, beginning with data logging. Now, contrary to popular belief, these VPN companies do keep a little bit of information on you, even if it's just the login information. However, ExpressVPN will not hold onto your browsing history, IP addresses, DNS queries, or metadata. However, they do maintain, and in my opinion, this is a bit more than the bare minimum, they do maintain which version of the app you accessed, when you accessed it, which server you used, and how much data you ultimately transferred. That's a little bit much. However, you can take some solace in the idea that they're not going to give that over to anyone else, as they are not a part of an international surveillance program. The next feature that we'll discuss about the ExpressVPN is the kill switch feature. Now, it sounds a bit aggressive, but the kill switch feature, which you can also call a network lock feature, essentially shuts down any app, websites, or software that you may be using if the VPN cuts out. So for whatever reason your VPN cuts out, you don't have to worry because this invisibility cloak will swoop in and protect your privacy. So that's a really cool feature on the ExpressVPN. An important feature of ExpressVPN is split tunneling. Now, I know that I'm guilty of always trying to address everyone's needs, but fortunately, so is ExpressVPN. So you may be in a situation where you would like to funnel some of your information through your VPN, and some you'd like that direct access to the internet. Unfortunately, ExpressVPN does give you split tunneling. So you have the capacity to funnel some of your traffic through that VPN, and some of your traffic goes directly to whatever IP address you want to be known using. So that's one of the elements of ExpressVPN that we find really great. Now, Netflix is also a feature for ExpressVPN. You know, it's a common question that people have is, can I use Netflix on this VPN? And right now the answer is yes, but it is complicated, as basically Netflix is always trying to prevent people from using VPNs with their software, with their application. And so for the moment, yes, ExpressVPN works with Netflix, and that's definitely a feature, but you know, that can always change as Netflix and ExpressVPN constantly try to one-up one another in that arena. So for now, yes, Netflix on ExpressVPN. All right, let's jump into the speed test. Now, to be clear, speed tests are complicated in that everyone's network is different. So I want to give you as much background as possible on what we were using. And we were in a Brooklyn apartment. No one else was home, on an Optimum network using a Asus VivoBook, which is a PC, and a Macbook Air. And that's when we conducted our speed test. Now, on the Mac, I had a ping or latency difference of 43%, from 14 milliseconds without the VPN to 20 with. Latency was less of a deal when I used ExpressVPN on the VivoBook at 19 milliseconds or 35.7% more latency. Now, without a VPN, I had a download speed of 37.05 megabytes per second on my Mac and 62.88 megabytes per second on my Windows computer. Now, for upload speed without the VPN, my numbers were 25.9 megabytes per second on the Mac and 40.61 megabytes per second on my VivoBook. Now, ExpressVPN slowed down my internet a bit on the MacBook with a download difference of 38.73% and an upload difference of minus 14.32%. Now, on the VivoBook, I tested a difference of 36.75% for download speed and 23.79% for upload. So overall, ExpressVPN performed better on my MacBook than my VivoBook, but the latency was slightly worse. DNS leak tests. So we all go on the internet, 800 times a day, but what do we know about it? Now, DNS stands for Domain Name Server. So, we type in google.com, but every time you do that, there is a unique IP address. And so what a DNS leak test is basically making sure is that when you go in through your VPN, like ExpressVPN, you're staying in that encrypted tunnel and that your information is not leaking out so that everyone can say, oh, where was this person? So fortunately, we did the DNS leak test and we came out clean. WebRTC leak test. So another vocabulary lesson is on deck for now with the WebRTC, which means web real-time communication. This is when two devices speak to one another without going through another server. Now, the rub is that WebRTC requires that each of the devices share their private IP address. And that's where ExpressVPN comes in. It essentially has that encrypted tunnel that protects you from your information getting out in that connection, and that's the type of thing that happens when you're live streaming or file sharing or FaceTiming. And so in our test, fortunately for us and for ExpressVPN, there was no leak. All right, so let's say you've gotten to this point in the review and you're thinking, you know what, I'm going to subscribe to ExpressVPN. Well, you've got three options: 1 month, 6 months, and 12 months. And of course, it gets cheaper the longer you decide to commit. However, if at any point in the first 30 days you're like, you know what, this is not the one, this is not for me, you can cancel and get that full refund. Now, it is a little bit short on the simultaneous connections with only 3. You can, of course, buy more, but it only comes with 3 simultaneous connections. However, you do get unlimited numbers of devices and servers in that plan. Just a quick note, you want to check all the manual configurations for the ExpressVPN. It works with a host of devices, browser extensions, and operating systems, but it did not work for me and my Chromebook, for example. So just make sure to check that before you purchase. So let's jump into customer support, because even the most tech-savvy person needs a little help every now and then. So with ExpressVPN, there are 3 ways that you can get support. You have live chat, you can email, and the app itself has a function for seeking out support. Now, on Amazon, there are 640 reviews for the ExpressVPN, and it has a 3.8 out of 5 stars. Now, of the reviews that mentioned customer service, 60% were positive. Now, I know that doesn't seem like a lot. However, that puts it at the top of the heap when it comes to customer support reviews for VPN companies. So overall, we're actually quite impressed with the customer support provided by the ExpressVPN. All right, let's talk about the ExpressVPN app, which can be found on Windows, Mac, Linux, BlackBerry, Android, just about anywhere, and it's where you're going to connect to the app and in some cases get some live support. So how does it work? Well, in the Apple Store, it gets 4.7 out of 5 stars, and in the Google Play Store, it gets 4.1 out of 5 stars. We say, whoa, that's a huge drop off. Well, to be fair, most apps don't even break 3.5. So 4.1 in the Google Play Store is actually pretty phenomenal. And so when it comes to apps and VPNs, ExpressVPN is one of the best ones out there. ExpressVPN is so recognizable for a reason. It doesn't log your data. It has a kill switch, split tunneling. You can generally access things like Netflix and uTorrent with it. It has an excellent customer support team and a great app. The only real downsides I see are the fact that it does retain a bit more than the bare minimum of your information, like what servers you access and how much data you actually transferred. And it also limits you to 3 simultaneous connections without paying more. But generally, it's a great app that won't disappoint. So that concludes our review of the ExpressVPN. If you appreciated today's video, give us a like and hit that subscribe button. As always, this is Gabe at Security Baron. Be secure.